Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. The rock band Clutch performs live in DC twice this week, first at the Atlantis on Thursday, then at the Anthem on Friday. I spoke to lead singer Neil Fallon about growing up in Montgomery County, Maryland, and forming the band with his high school buddies to record hits like Electric Worry.
Jason?
Neil Fallon, hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP.
Thank you for having me.
We're talking because Clutch, the famous local hometown hero band, we'll say, is coming to rock the Atlantis on July 20th, a new venue, and then the Anthem the next day on July 21st. Talk about how exciting that is, because the Atlantis has only been open for maybe like only a month. I think the Foo Fighters opened it like May 30th, something like that. And then of course the Anthem is one of the coolest venues of the last couple years that opened by IMP. But yeah, how excited are you that you are getting to basically help open a new place?
It's cool. It's I haven't been to the Atlantis. I've heard nothing but great things about it. And the Anthem, we performed there once before, and I've seen as a spectator plenty of bands there, and it's both a great place to be a performer and to see a performance, which sometimes can be a rarity in venues. But this one was purpose built and by some of the best in the business.
Oh, yeah, I was at that opening show. What was it? Well, speaking of Foo Fighters, they opened the Anthem as well, and the Struts opened for them, and we just interviewed Luke Spiller of the Struts. So, Clutch, you're in good company here on TOP. But yeah, I mean, the Atlantis, well, it's supposed to be like a replica of the original 930 Club location before they moved over to the new spot. But did you have any, memories of going to that original 930 or the new 930 for that matter?
Yeah, I do. And I think I was probably late 16, early 17 when I saw my first bands there. When I was my parents finally relented and said, "Fine, you can go downtown, get out of our hair." And I remember those shows better than some of anything I saw online yesterday, because it was such an impression, and there was such an intensity. And when you're younger and things are new, you're absorbing things for the first time, and I think it set the bar so high in some ways that it's been hard to live up to. And I saw the Bad Brains there was one of my earliest shows, and that left a lasting impression, and I have very fond memories of coming home smelling terrible with ringing ears, but those are very very fond memories regardless of the noise.
That's such a good point, that those live memories of going to shows growing up sticks in your brain, even if they were like older buildings or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, it makes an impression, like you said, that's better than whatever you just watched online, because I feel like the stuff that comes at us online is just like, we're so inundated by digital content now that it's just like it just kind of all runs together after a while. That's such a good point.
We're social creatures too, and I think you can't unless you're in a room with other bodies. It's nowhere near the same. It's kind of a sorry imitation. Not to say that it doesn't serve its purposes, but live music is hundreds of thousands of years old, and I think that there's a human instinct to kind of gravitate towards groups and listen to a common beat.
Absolutely. Yes. Let's use these awesome new digital, the technology as tools to promote the live shows. But you got to go out to the live shows, folks, and rock out with Clutch. Well, we should tell everybody, the reason, obviously, that you're able to have all these local DC 930 Club memories and all that good stuff is because you were born nearby. You were born in Portsmouth, Virginia in 1971. So what all did you, you said you went to the Bad Brains, but what all else did you listen to growing up? Like, what were your musical sparks that kicked it off for you?
Well, I think like a lot of people, my parents' record collection was the first thing I remember, and those are a lot of the usual suspects, like the Beatles and Dylan and whatnot. A lot of folk music, and then the stuff that you heard on the radio growing up in the 80s around here was DC 101 and Q107, whatever was playing on that. And then not to date myself, but
go for it.
but then when you turn, 15, 16 years old, kids want to form their own identity, whether it be the way they dress or who they hang out with, or the music they listen to. And I was one of those, and who's kind of saw music as a important part of becoming who I am, and I'm still trying to figure that out. But I think I didn't have an older brother or sister to introduce me to stuff, so I kind of relied on other people's older brothers and sisters. And by then, it was okay. Here's Black Flag, or here's Minor Threat, or here's Fugazi, and looking back, I think I took it for granted that we grew up in such a fertile music scene. I just kind of assumed, every city had something like this, and that's not the case. It's a really unique scene that has it had its punk rock hardcore scene, had its metal scene, it had, of course, its go-go scene, and in the 80s, it was it was an exciting time, and those are some of the initial things. But going back to what I said about digital, one of the good things about it is now suddenly I realize that I know so very little about music because I've only scratched the surface, and I try to listen to as many different kinds of things I can. Life's too short to kind of box yourself into a subgenre.
Absolutely. Yes. That's the good thing of the internet is to be able to keep discovering and peeling back as after you've scratched the surface. Well, then, sorry. So then if you were born in Portsmouth, Virginia, how did you end up hooking up with the guys in I guess cause the band formed in 91 in Germantown. But when did you hook up with those guys? Like, how did that meeting happen?
Well, my dad was in the Navy. That's why I was born in Portsmouth, and I only lived there in the first year of my life.
Okay.
Then I lived out in the West, in Washington State for a long time, and my dad was only supposed to come out here for a year assignment, and I think that's a very common story in the DMV. Is you're supposed to only be here for a year or two, and then you end up spending 40. So we moved to Gaithersburg. And then I eventually went to Seneca, and I met John Paul, basically because my last name starts with F and his starts with G. So you kind of got the same homeroom, and then you were next to each other in the locker commons.
That's hilarious.
Dan lived in the same neighborhood that we eventually moved into. And I didn't know Tim too well until after high school, because he was a year ahead of us. And it was a big school. I forget exactly how many kids there, but it was easy to not meet people because it was ginormous.
Yeah.
But then we just kind of been knuckleheads about it ever since, and just haven't quit.
Now, I was riffing one more Seneca Valley thing. I was riffing with was Mark Bryan of Hootie and the Blowfish who went to Seneca. Did you happen to cross paths, or was that different? I guess a different timeline.
Yeah, I think they were maybe a year or two ahead of us. I do believe Dave Dowling, who was in Jimmy's Chicken Shack, we were both in junior ROTC together. But I could be wrong. I should have researched this before this interview.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Well, cool. And then didn't you go to University of Maryland? Like, was it an English, like a literature degree, something like that? Did that help? Is that why you have such good song lyrics, man? The English background?
Well, thank you for saying that. And yes, that is correct. I went to College Park and got a degree in English, which I didn't really have a plan. I just thought maybe I would continue going to school or maybe teach, because an English degree it's pretty vague. And I think I was very fortunate to luck out in a career that I can use what I learned. And I love words. I think words you can use just like you use notes, and when you string them together, they have rhythms. And I always I've always paid close attention to what's being said in the song, because I find them to be little movies that can last anywhere from 2 minutes to 20 minutes. And it's the most frustrating thing in the world. I pull my hair out every time I do it, and sometimes I keep on changing them, but it's also the most satisfying thing to kind of scratch that creative itch.
Absolutely. Well, I want to go into some of the creative itches you scratched, some of the songs you wrote, but real quick, you do really, you're talking to our WTOP movie critic too, and you said they're like little movies. So I want to know, like, what is Neil Fallon's, what is your go-to movie? Like, what is your all-time favorite flick?
All time. Oh boy, I'm gonna say the one I have like juvenile nostalgia for is Aliens.
Oh, so
I mean,
good.
it doesn't get old. I saw it so many times in the theater. Probably my favorite movie of all time. And then
You're talking about the sequel,
kind of more,
the James Cameron sequel, right?
yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
love Aliens, but I was, gosh, 16 or 17 years old when that movie came out, and it was just perfect for that kind of that demographic, so to speak.
Game
And
over, man. Yeah, my wife and I always have
yeah,
a Alien versus Predator debate. I'm an Alien camp. She's a Predator camp. I mean, they're both great, obviously, but yes, that's our internal debate in our house.
yeah, that's a fair debate, but I'm with you on Aliens. Um, and more contemporary, I I think No Country for Old Men is probably my most favorite movie that's come out in recent times. It's
So good, so
I'm
good.
a,
Coen
I
Brothers,
love
masterpiece.
it. Cormac McCarthy is probably my favorite writer, and to be able to actually adapt one of his books and make it convincing is a feat unto itself. But it's just beautifully shot. The acting is phenomenal, and I love movies that have a lot of silence in it and a lot of quiet, and not rely on just endless dialogue to explain everything. And so yeah, and there's so many of my other favorite movies that are Coen Brothers movies as well, but that's no numero uno.
Oh yeah, I mean Fargo, Big Lebowski. They're just all timers. But yeah, No Country for Old Men. You mentioned like the silence, and they're just what they do, like with painting visual like symbolism. Like when Anton Chigurh walks in and holds up the call it friendo, that guy, that what is he, like the convenience store guy or the whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And in the background, there's like all those little cables hanging behind him. They almost look like nooses. Like it's like there's just like so much visual symbolism going on in that movie. It is a masterpiece. Rest in peace, Cormac McCarthy just died, I guess, but. All
Yeah,
right.
just
Well,
I think about a month or two. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that ties into your literary background, English degree at Terps. But yes, we've officially tangented. But my listeners will kill me if we don't at least ask some music questions. They're like, we didn't hear Neil talk about movies, but tell me about that first one, that Transnational Speedway League. You recorded that out in San Fran, but then the next one, Clutch, was at Uncle Punchy Studios here in Silver Spring. Like, what? Tell me, just take me into the sort of like why you guys went out to San Fran for that first one, but then came back home to do the second one.
The first one we did. Well, first of all, we didn't know any better. We thought, yeah, that's a totally practical and rational idea, is to get in a van and drive 2,000 miles to a studio. But I think it was basic. That studio, Razor's Edge, was owned by Jonathan Burnside, and he did a lot of the Melvins records back then, and we were huge fans of the Melvins, particularly of the drum sound. And a lot of times that's the main purpose of going to a specific studio, is to get that drum sound. And JP wanted that. And then speaking for myself, I mean, I hadn't written any lyrics. To be honest, I didn't know what the hell I was doing when we were in the studio. I'd never been in that environment before. So I think, and also creatively, we were trying to find ourselves still. And I think it was the next record, the self-titled record, where we kind of found the sound that we are more or less kind of still pursuing in different tacks.
Gotcha. And yeah, and just being a local guy myself, I always like seeing your albums. You always have sort of this DMV. There's some, I don't know, I'm sure seeing the influences, like the Clutch, the self-titled one you're mentioning, has I Have the Body of John Wilkes Booth. Elephant Riders is sort of like, I don't know what you would even say, like alternate Civil War history with spaceships and stuff. But like, do you find that, this journey through hallowed grounds, Civil War corridor seeping in a lot of your stuff?
Yes and no. I mean, I think there's creative phases. I mean, speaking of that song, I Have the Body of John Wilkes Booth, I was struggling for lyrics, and the Washington City paper had a article, I think it was on the cover, that was about the location of John Wilkes Booth, and I just found like, okay, here, this is good enough. We'll go with that. And I like, writing a song, you're given license to write a little fiction, and I'm certainly not an expert on anything. And the Civil War bit, that was when we were in the doing the Elephant Riders. We were living in a house up close to Harper's Ferry,
West
It was
Virginia.
very, very old. Yeah, 1780 it was built, and it had played a big part in that. And I just kind of there's a strange, I don't, darkness isn't not right the word. There's just the ominous vibe there, and I'm not
Yeah.
really a ghost person, but I do think a location can absorb the collective energies of what happens there. And
Yeah. That's I Have the Body of John
it's
Brown.
yeah, see, John, that was the other,
Different John.
there's so many different aspects of it, and it gets glossed over, and I really got knee deep into it just because it was so new to me. And
Yeah.
it was a cool place for single guys to live, because it was cheap and it was disgusting, and we can make as much noise as we wanted, but I would never move back there.
That should go on the West Virginia Wild and Wonderful.
Well, when I say there, I just mean that house. West
Oh
Virginia.
yeah, okay. I love it. Well, obviously we don't.
I don't want to disaffect the good people of West Virginia.
Oh, it's a great, beautiful, beautiful state. You were talking about that house, that 100-year-old house alone, folks, and don't get it twisted. Well, we don't have time to go through all the songs, obviously, but I want to ask about Immortal from Pure Rock Fury. I think that even showed up in some video games, like a younger generation probably is discovering it through that stuff. But yeah, any memories of writing Immortal or just that album in general?
Yeah, that was actually, was a kind of a collaboration between us and Leslie West of Mountain fame. Jason Cosero, who was recording us, was friends with Leslie and said that he and we would make a good team. So Leslie came in and he had this riff, and we wrote the song. And it was years later, I was listening to like a Mountain compilation, and there it was. So it wasn't the riff, that is. He had just kind of, I don't know if he had forgotten that he had already written a song with that riff or just didn't care, but it appears in two songs. I forget I think it's called "I'm Going Down" is the name of the Mountain song, or maybe it's a Leslie West solo song.
You're talking about Leslie West
cool.
of as in Mississippi Queen, that Mountain. You wrote that with Leslie West of Mountain.
That's correct. Yes.
That is freaking awesome. I had no idea. Well, there you go, folks. You pick up cool clutch tidbits, although I'm sure your diehards already knew that, but I think it's cool. All right. And maybe time for one more before I want to get to your new album too, but Electric Worry, I have to talk about that. That is from Beale Street to Oblivion in 2007. It's such a badass song. If no one's ever heard of Clutch, that you can just put that on and riding down the road, and that bang 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 vamonos vomino. It is like you can just feel the sweat flying through the radio. What was it? I guess it's sort of like a quasi cover of like a Muddy Waters riff, but yeah, just take me into the recording of that. It's an all timer for me, man.
Well, thank you. It started as it's actually a Mississippi Fred McDowell song, more or less, but a lot of those old kind of borrowed from each other, and there's similar lyrics and similar riffs in different songs. But I had been messing around with learning that Mississippi Fred McDowell song, and then we kind of made this hybrid of his song and in our tune, and had Eric Oblender on harp and Mick on keys. And for whatever, and I remember recording it thinking, this is a kind of a weird song. Do we even want to put it on the album? And it goes to show that sometimes the person that writes is too close to hear it at points, because it has since become, our biggest song. We can play that, in festivals in Europe, and that's the one everyone knows. So it's still a fun song to play. We play it almost every night, just because I think people that come to see us for the first time really want to hear that. And sure, maybe people have seen us numbers of times, have heard enough, but you try to please as many people as you can.
Yes, give the people what they want. You know what I mean? I think that's smart. Well, let's tease before we run. Let's tease the latest album, Sunrise on Slaughter Beach. I mean, I know, folks. There's 13 studio albums and like 5 live albums, a bunch of compilations. Like, there's no way we don't have time to do all of them. But I want to give you a chance to tease Sunrise on Slaughter Beach. How have you been enjoying playing that one live? Have you had a good reaction from the diehards, or how did that actually even come together? I guess probably during COVID.
We had spent a good deal of that period live streaming, and it wasn't until at the end of it that we started writing a record. And I had intended not to write a record that was in any way dark or kind of reflect the mood of the pandemic. And started writing what I thought were pretty upbeat lyrics, but then eventually it started getting darker and darker. And I think that's just because you can't fight your subconscious. It's a pretty dark record. The title is borrowed from Slaughter Beach, Delaware, which is just north of kind of Lewis and Rehoboth. And my family and I vacation up there every once in a while. And
oh, nice.
I just thought the name Slaughter Beach was the most metal sounding getaway that you could hope for. That's a pretty cool part of this area, is that section of the Delaware Bay. There's a lot of history there that's been overgrown by swamp and marshland, and that's one of them. And it was inspired by a kind of a late night walk along the beach amongst the ghost crabs and horseshoe crabs, and it's a cool spot.
Awesome. And that album also had Nosferatu Madre. So now that's how we bring it back to our movie references, my friend. Nosferatu. Awesome. Well, everyone check out that album and check out the concerts. Anything else you want to say about the upcoming show? Tell our listeners to come out to the Atlantis and the Anthem, and why it's going to be such a kick-ass pair of shows.
It's going to be these shows are usually the most nerve-wracking because I recognize a lot of people in the audience because they're hometown shows. But I think that makes it fun because a lot of people recognize each other because it's local and they've been coming here for years. I will say it is bittersweet. One person that will not be there is Gus, who was the house sound guy for 930 Club, who passed away just a couple weeks before the opening of the new club, and he was instrumental in kind of getting that thing together. And he was also the first person to ever mix Clutch. He mixed us at Fort Reno in DC in 1991 and countless other times. So but I guess in some ways he'll always live on in that not only our memories, but the building itself, both the 930 Club and the new club. So people will be enjoying his hard work and genius for many, many, many years to come.
Absolutely. Yes. Gus's spirit will live on in all of these AMP venues and for years to come. And so, hey, thank you so much for a wide ranging conversation. I didn't know we would get into everything we did, but thank you so much for doing this. And before we run, why do you love living in Silver Spring? Let's end there, because, WTOP is like a beltway kind of a thing. So why is Silver Spring such a kick-ass place to sort of live with the family? You've gained fame and fortune and probably could live wherever and tour wherever, but what keeps you staying in Silver Spring?
Well, my wife had been working years ago as a dental assistant in Chevy Chase, and there was no way we were going to ever be able to live in Chevy Chase, but we had to live close to where she could work, and I can live anywhere. And Silver Spring, and so we ended up eventually we Tacoma Park and then Silver Spring, and we probably could have moved anywhere as well, but we had a kid, and then the kid makes friends, and the kid starts going to school, and once that happens, to uproot oneself, it can be very, very difficult. But thankfully, I don't feel the itch to do that because it's a pretty cool town. It's got a little bit of everything. It's close to DC, and I dig it here.
Yeah, you got the AFI Silver Theater, baby. They might have No Country for Old Men or Aliens playing soon. You never know.
They put on great movies. I love it there.
Oh, yeah, so many greats. All right. Well, you've been very generous with your time. Neil Fallon of Clutch. The band is coming to rock the new Atlantis venue July 20th. And then at the Anthem, another awesome spot on July 21st. So everybody get your tickets now. Hey, Neil, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.